The smell of reality. Stop imagining the castle. Forget the dragon-slaying hero with perfect teeth and the princess in the tower. If you want to survive the Middle Ages, you need to look down, not up. You need to look at the mud. Only, it isn't mud. Welcome to London. The year is 1348. Before we hand you a sword, which you would likely drop on your own foot, we have to address the sensory assault that is hitting you right now. The first thing you notice isn't the majesty of the architecture, it is the smell. It is a physical wall of stench so thick you can taste it. It's a cocktail of rotting animal entrails from the butcher's block, wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and the contents of thousands of chamber pots tossed casually out of second-story windows. Hollywood lied to you. The Middle Ages weren't just dusty, they were wet, sticky, and overwhelmingly biological. And in this chaotic ecosystem, the Knights Templar are the 1% of the 1%. You are not them. To understand the real history, we have to look at the jobs that actually kept civilization from collapsing under its own filth. We are starting at the bottom, literally. Imagine it's 11 p.m. The curfew bell has rung at St. Martin-le-Grand. The city gates are shut. The respectable citizens, the merchants, the smiths, the bakers are shuttered in their homes. But the city is not asleep. Shadows move through the narrow, twisting alleyways of Cheapside. They are the Nightmen. To the modern American eye, they look like villains. They wear rough-spun tunics stained with things you'd rather not identify. They carry massive buckets and shovels. They are Gong Farmers. Gong is an Old English word for going or passage, which became a polite euphemism for human waste. A Gong Farmer is exactly what it sounds like, an excavator of excrement. In a city like London, with a population booming and no sewage system, every house has a cesspit, a hole in the ground, usually in the cellar or the backyard, where the waste goes. When that pit gets full, it doesn't just magically disappear. If it overflows, it seeps into the water supply, and everyone dies of cholera. Enter the Gong Farmer. You, the modern job seeker, have just been hired. Your shift starts when the honest world sleeps. By law, you are only allowed to work between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. The city council knows your job is necessary, but they don't want to see you, and they definitely don't want to smell you. You and your team arrive at a wealthy merchant's house. The cesspit hasn't been emptied in 2 years. You have to climb inside. There is no hazmat suit, there is no ventilation. There is just you, a ladder, a bucket, and a solid 5 feet of compressed 2-year-old human waste. The gases alone, ammonia and methane, are enough to make your eyes burn and your lungs spasm. Historically, Gong Farmers actually died from asphyxiation by simply climbing into the wrong pit too quickly. But the smell is the least of your worries. You have to shovel this night soil into wicker baskets, hoist it up to your partner, and load it onto a cart, and you have to do it quietly. Gold in the gross. You are knee-deep in the muck, breathing through a cloth soaked in vinegar, the medieval version of a gas mask, though entirely ineffective against bacteria. You might think this is the worst moment of your life, but wait, it gets more dangerous. Working by candlelight in a confined space filled with methane is a chemistry experiment gone wrong. There are recorded instances in medieval chronicles of Gong Farmers accidentally igniting pockets of gas, causing explosions that literally blew the privy apart. Imagine explaining that to St. Peter at the Perglates. You didn't die in a glorious crusade, you died because you brought an open flame into a fart chamber. Once the solid waste is shoveled into barrels, you have to transport it. You cart the night soil out of the city gates to designated dumping grounds, often near the Thames or marshlands outside the city walls. If you spill any on the street, that's a fine. If you dump it in the wrong place, that's a fine. If you work past the 5 a.m. bell and the sun comes up, the citizens might actually beat you. You are the shadow that cleans the city, but the city wants to pretend you don't exist. So, why on earth would anyone do this job? Because it pays. In the 14th century, a standard unskilled laborer might earn a penny or two a day. A skilled carpenter might earn 3 or 4. A gong farmer, however, could earn 3 times the wage of a standard laborer. In a feudal system where social mobility is non-existent, being a gong farmer is strangely lucrative. It was the medieval equivalent of high-risk hazardous waste disposal. You were essentially a freelancer with a monopoly on a service nobody else was willing to perform. And then there are the tips.
When people use the privy, they don't just deposit biological waste, they drop things. Coins slip out of pouches, rings slide off fingers. In the darkness of a privy chute, nobody goes fishing for a lost brooch. It's gone until you show up 2 years later. Gong farmers had a nickname, gold finders. Whatever you found in the muck was generally yours to keep. There were legends of gong farmers retiring early after finding a merchant's lost pouch of silver marks buried in the sludge. It brings a whole new meaning to the phrase, filthy rich. But as the sun rises and you wash the worst of the grime off in the river, which ironically is where you just dumped the waste, you realize something about medieval life. The danger isn't just in the filth. It's in the things people think are clean. You head home to your designated neighborhood, often restricted to the outskirts because of the lingering smell on your clothes, and you pass a cloth workshop. You see men and women stomping in large wooden vats, looking like they are making wine. But they aren't crushing grapes. They are holding their noses. They are the fullers. And if you thought the gong farmer had it bad, wait until you see what these people are standing in. It isn't mud, and it isn't water. It's urine, and they are buying it by the bucket. The human washing machines. Welcome to the fulling mill. If the gong farmer represents the disposal of waste, the fuller represents the recycling of it. And this job is arguably more physically exhausting than shoveling sludge. In medieval Europe, wool is king. England's economy is built on the back of the sheep. But raw wool, fresh off the animal, is greasy. It is coated in a waxy substance called lanolin. You cannot dye it, and you certainly cannot weave it into fine cloth while it's slick with sheep sweat and grease. You need a degreaser. Today, we use harsh chemicals. In the 14th century, they used the strongest alkaline substance readily available, stale urine. When urine sits for a few days, the urea breaks down into ammonia. Ammonia is fantastic at breaking down grease and bleaching fabric. This is why the Romans used it to whiten their togas and their teeth, but let's not dwell on that. In medieval England, urine is a commodity. It is so valuable that pots are left on street corners for passers-by to contribute to the local textile industry. This is where you come in. You are a fuller, also known as a walker. Your job is to take the woven wool cloth, submerge it in a large wooden vat filled with water, fuller's earth, a type of clay, and gallons of fermented human urine. Then you climb in. For 10 to 12 hours a day, you march, you stomp, you walk the cloth. The goal is twofold: to scrub out the grease, lanolin, and to mat the fibers together to create a thicker, more durable fabric. You are essentially a human washing machine on the agitate cycle. But instead of warm water and tide, you are waist-deep in cold, ammoniated pee. The ammonia fumes are constant. They burn your nose and throat. But the real damage is to your legs. Standing in urine all day softens the skin, making it prone to cracking, sores, and fungal infections. Walker's rot was a common ailment, a medieval version of trench foot that never really healed because you were back in the vat the next morning. Yet this was a vital trade. That dashing knight riding past you on his high horse, the crimson tunic he wears over his chainmail, was stomped on by a guy named Aethelred who hadn't washed his legs in 6 years. The entire feudal fashion system depended on the ammonia harvested from the bladders of the poor. But let's say you have weak ankles. You can't stomp for 12 hours. You need a job that requires patience, a strong stomach, and a willingness to be bait. You leave the city walls entirely. You head for the marshes, the bogs, the places where the mist clings to the ground even at noon. The medical industry is hiring. They don't need doctors, who are mostly astrologers guessing at charts. They need suppliers. They need the one thing that medieval medicine cannot function without. They need leeches. And since you can't exactly catch them with a net, you're going to catch them with the only tool you have, your own legs. Blood for money. You are standing in a bog in the countryside, likely somewhere damp and miserable like the Somerset levels. It is cold. The water is murky. You are a leech collector, and your job description is terrifyingly simple. Feed yourself to the wildlife. In medieval medicine, the answer to almost any ailment, from headaches to hemorrhoids, is balancing the humors. The 4 humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, dictate health. If you have a fever, you have too much blood. You need to be bled. And while a barber surgeon can open a vein with a knife, leeches are preferred for delicate areas or those who faint at the sight of steel. This creates a massive demand for Hirundo medicinalis, the European medicinal leech. But leeches are picky. They live in shallow, vegetated water. You cannot scoop them up easily because they hide in the mud. They are attracted to movement and heat. They are attracted to mammal blood. So you roll up your trousers. You wade into the water. You stand there. You wait. You feel a tickle, then a prick, then another. You have to wait until the leech has latched on firmly, piercing your skin with its 3 jaws and hundreds of tiny teeth. If you pull it off too soon, you might damage it, or worse, leave its mouthparts inside your leg, causing a nasty infection. Once a dozen or so leeches are feasting on your calves, you wade out of the water. You carefully detach them, often using a pinch of salt or heat, and store them in a wet basket or a clay pot filled with damp moss. Then you go back in for round 2. A good leech collector might harvest hundreds in a day, but there is a biological limit to this career: blood loss. You are literally selling your own vitality. Chronic anemia is an occupational hazard. Leech collectors often suffer from dizziness, fatigue, and pale skin. The wounds on their legs rarely heal because they are constantly being reopened. The water in the bogs is filthy, so infections, gangrene, sepsis are common. It was not unusual for a leech collector to die from the very infections the leeches were supposed to cure in others. Yet this was often a job for women. In medieval records, many leech collectors were older women or widows who had no other way to earn a living. It required no capital, no tools, just a high pain tolerance and a desperate need to eat. Eventually, the demand for leeches became so high in Europe that the species was hunted to near extinction in England. By the 19th century, millions of leeches were being imported because the poor leech collectors had bled the British swamps dry. But maybe you're squeamish about blood. You want a job that deals with the afterlife. You want to work for the church. The church is the most powerful institution in the world. Surely working there is safe, clean, and respectable. Think again.
You enter the grand cathedral. It is silent, holy, and dimly lit. But beneath the stone floor, the crypts are full. The graveyards are bursting. And the bones have to go somewhere. Meet the Sin Eater. No, wait. That's a myth. Let's talk about the real Grim Reaper of the churchyard, the charnel housekeeper, the landlord of the dead. You are standing in a churchyard in 14th century York. It is small, enclosed by stone walls, and absolutely packed. Here's the theological problem. Everyone wants to be buried in consecrated ground to ensure their soul makes it to heaven, but people keep dying, and the ground isn't getting any bigger. Real estate is a nightmare for the living, but it's worse for the dead. Enter the sexton, or more specifically, the keeper of the charnel house. Your job is essentially grave recycling. In the medieval world, a grave is not a forever home. It is a short-term rental. A body stays in the ground for maybe 10 or 20 years, just long enough for the flesh to rot away. Once the lease is up and a new parishioner dies, the old tenant is evicted. You take a shovel and dig up the previous occupant. Hopefully, they are fully skeletonized. If they aren't, well, you have a messy afternoon ahead of you. You collect the bones, the dry work, and transport them to the charnel house or ossuary, a building usually attached to the church or in the crypt. This isn't just dumping bones in a pile. It is interior design with human remains. You have to stack the femurs in neat, firewood-like rows. You line the skulls on shelves, staring out at the visitors. In places like the crypt of St. Leonard's in Hyde, England, the shelves are stacked floor to ceiling with thousands of thigh bones and skulls, arranged with a symmetry that is both beautiful and deeply disturbing. You are the librarian of the deceased. You separate the rich from the poor, though at this stage it's hard to tell a duke's tibia from a peasant's shin. The smell in a charnel house isn't the wet rot of the Gong Farmer. It's a dry, dusty, musty scent of ancient earth and calcium. But the job carries a heavy psychological weight. You are dismantling the ancestors of your neighbors. You might dig up a skull and recognize the dent in the forehead from a tavern brawl 20 years ago and think, oh, that's old Miller John. And then you put John on the shelf next to his wife. It is respectful desecration. However, if handling the bones of the common folk is too gloomy, perhaps you crave the high life. You want to be at court. You want to rub elbows with the king. You want power, influence, and the ear of the monarch. Be careful what you wish for. There is a position at the royal court that is technically one of the highest honors a nobleman can achieve. It grants you the most intimate access to the king possible. You will be alone with him every single day. You will know his secrets, his health, and his private thoughts. But the title gives it away. You are not the hand of the king. You are the groom of the stool. And stool does not mean a chair. The royal wiper. We are now in the inner sanctum of the king's private chambers. The air smells of lavender and beeswax, a stark contrast to the Gong Farmer's trench. You are dressed in fine velvet. You are a knight, a nobleman, perhaps the son of a duke. You have trained your whole life for glory. And here you are, standing next to a velvet-covered wooden box with a hole in the top. This is the close stool. Your job title? Groom of the stool. Your duty? To assist the monarch in the most private bodily function imaginable. Yes, to put it bluntly, your job is to wipe the king's bottom. In the Tudor era, specifically under Henry VIII, this was not a punishment, it was one of the most coveted positions in the entire kingdom. You might ask, why would anyone fight for the right to handle royal excrement? The answer is access. Think about it. When is the king most vulnerable? When is his guard down? When is he stuck in one place for 10 minutes with nothing to do but talk? When he is on the toilet. As the groom of the stool, you are the only person in the room. You aren't just cleaning him, you are listening. The king might complain about his wife, grumble about a rival nation, or ask you for your opinion on a new tax law. You have the king's ear while cleaning his rear. You are the gatekeeper of the king's secrets. You also become a sort of amateur doctor. In medieval medicine, the appearance of one's waist was the primary diagnostic tool. You are the first to know if the king is sick. You discuss his digestion with the royal physicians. You are intimately involved in the physical continuity of the monarchy. Men like Sir Henry Norris, groom to Henry VIII, became incredibly powerful. They controlled who could speak to the king. Ambassadors would bribe the groom just to get a word in. You are essentially the White House chief of staff, but your office is a bathroom. However, the stakes are lethal.
Because you know the king's secrets, you are dangerous. If the political winds change, you are the first loose end that needs tying up. Sir Henry Norris, for example, was accused of sleeping with Anne Boleyn, a likely fabricated charge, and was beheaded. One minute you're wiping the royal backside, the next your head is on a spike on London Bridge. The Groom of the Stool represents the bizarre paradox of medieval life. Dignity was secondary to power. But let's leave the court intrigue and head down into the bowels of the castle. Let's go to the great kitchen. You hear the roaring fires. You smell roasting meat, boar, venison, peacock. It smells delicious. But then you see a small, soot-covered figure in the corner next to a fire hot enough to melt skin. He isn't cooking. He's running. Or rather, he's cranking. Meet the spit boy, the human engine of the medieval feast. You are the motor. That is your entire existence. In the great kitchen of a castle or a wealthy manor, the fireplace is cavernous, large enough to roast an ox whole. But meat is heavy. A dressed boar can weigh 200 pounds. If you leave it sitting over the flames, the side facing the fire turns to charcoal, while the top remains raw and teeming with bacteria. To get that perfect, even roast, the meat must turn, constantly, slowly, for 10 hours. Enter the spit boy, or turnspit. You sit on a small stool inches from the blaze. Your face is scorched. Your eyebrows were singed off weeks ago. Your job is to crank the heavy iron handle that rotates the spit. It requires a steady rhythm. If you crank too fast, the fat flies off and flares up in the fire, potentially burning down the kitchen. If you crank it too slow, the cook, usually a tyrannical figure with a ladle the size of a shovel, will hit you.
In larger kitchens, they installed a turnspit wheel, a giant wooden hamster wheel mounted on the wall near the ceiling. You climb inside and walk, and walk, and walk. You are walking to nowhere, suspended above a roaring fire, enveloped in greasy smoke. The physical toll is grotesque. Spit boys were known to develop gammy arms, where one side of the body became muscularly overdeveloped while the other atrophied. The heat caused dehydration and heat stroke. The smoke destroyed their lungs. It was a job so miserable that humanity eventually decided it was inhumane for humans. So they invented a dog to do it. In the 16th century, the British bred the turnspit dog, Latin name Vernipater cur. It was a long-bodied, short-legged dog, an ancestor of the corgi or dachshund, specifically designed to fit inside the wheel and run for hours. When the cook wanted to roast a chicken, he threw the dog in the wheel and threw a hot coal in after it to get it moving. If you are working a job that is eventually outsourced to a corgi, you know you have hit rock bottom. But at least the spit boy is warm. There are jobs where the cold is the enemy, and the prey is much faster than a roasting pig. Let's go to the city streets. It is night again. You see a man wearing a sash covered in strange, dangling, furry objects. He smells like a ferret cage. He carries a pole with a banner featuring rats. He is the rat catcher. In the popular imagination, the rat catcher is a folk hero, like the Pied Piper. In reality, he is a social pariah who hangs out in the filthiest parts of the city. Rats are a disaster. They eat the grain stores, they gnaw through wood, and though medieval people didn't quite understand the flea connection yet, they bring death. The rat catcher is the exterminator, but he has no fumigation tent. He has no neurotoxins. He has a stick, a bag, and a ferret. The Rat King. You are standing in a merchant's cellar, surrounded by sacks of grain. The scratching sound is everywhere. It's coming from behind the walls. It's coming from under the floorboards. You are the rat catcher. In the hierarchy of medieval trades, you are somewhere between a beggar and a magician. You are often homeless, traveling from town to town, wearing a distinct costume so people know who you are and to stay away from you. You might wear a sash adorned with rat tails, or even taxidermied rats, like a grotesque Boy Scout merit badge sash. Your toolkit is biological. You don't have poison. Arsenic is expensive and dangerous to use around food. You have a ferret. The ferret is your business partner. You strap a small bell around its neck and shove it down a rat hole. The ferret is a sleek, murderous tube of muscle. It chases the rats out the other side, where you or your terrier dog are waiting. It is frantic, bloody work. Rats fight back. They are desperate. They have sharp incisors, and they are covered in fleas. A rat catcher's hands are a map of scars. Every bite is a roll of the dice. Will you get a simple infection? Will you get rat bite fever? Or will you get the plague? Spoiler alert, the fleas on the rats you are hugging to your chest are the Uber drivers for the Black Death. But the rat catcher is also a hustler. Since you are paid per rat or by the job security is a problem if you are too good at it. If you kill all the rats, you are unemployed. So, many rat catchers became con artists. They would breed rats in secret. They would arrive in a village, secretly release a bag of their own tame rats into a house, and then miraculously catch them the next day in front of the amazed homeowner. It was the medieval equivalent of a computer repair guy installing a virus just so he can charge you to remove it. Despite the deception and the squalor, the rat catcher was essential. Without him, the grain stores would vanish and the village would starve. He was a necessary evil. But let's say the rat wins. You get bitten. The wound turns black. The red streaks of blood poisoning are creeping up your arm. You need a doctor. Do not go to a physician. Physicians are university-educated academics who quote Galen and examine your urine flask but rarely touch you. They are too expensive and too useless for an acute infection. You need a man of action. You need a man who has sharp blades and isn't afraid of blood. You need to go to the local barber shop. Look for the red and white striped pole. We see it today and think haircut. In the medieval ages, the white represented the bandages and the red represented the blood. The pole itself symbolized the stick a patient squeezed while screaming in pain. Welcome to the office of the barber surgeon. Take a seat. This is going to hurt. Short back and sides and amputation. You're sitting in a wooden chair. The floor is covered in sawdust to soak up the fluids. The man standing over you is holding a razor in one hand and a rusty saw in the other. He asks if you want a shave, a haircut, or that gangrenous toe removed. This is the barber surgeon. In the U.S. today, we have a strict separation between cosmetology and trauma surgery. In the Middle Ages, they were the same department. The logic was simple. Physicians were scholars who studied books. Barbers were guys with sharp knives who knew how to cut things. If you needed something cut, be it hair, a beard, or a limb, you went to the barber. Let's look at your rat bite wound. It's infected. The barber surgeon takes a look and shakes his head. The corruption has spread. The arm has to go. There is no anesthesia, no ether, no morphine. The pain management protocol is a stiff drink of ale, a piece of leather to bite down on, and 4 strong assistants to hold you down. The surgeon has to be fast. A good surgeon could remove a limb in under a minute. Speed was the only mercy. He cuts through the flesh with a curved knife. Then comes the bone saw. The sound is something you will never forget, a dry, rhythmic rasping. Once the limb is severed, the bleeding must be stopped instantly or you will die in seconds. He doesn't stitch it. He grabs a cauterizing iron, a piece of metal heated until it glows red, and jams it on the open stump. The scream you let out would curdle milk. The smell of burning flesh fills the shop, mingling with the scent of hair tonic from the customer next to you. Surviving the surgery is the easy part. Surviving the hospital is the miracle. Barber surgeons rarely washed their tools between patients. He might have just lanced a boil on a plague victim before he started sawing your bone. The concept of germs is 500 years away.
They believed pus was a good sign, laudable pus, indicating the body was healing. In reality, it was a massive staph infection. But maybe you just have a toothache. Surely that's safer. You visit the tooth drawer. He is often a specialist barber who travels the fairs. He wears a necklace of extracted human teeth to advertise his skill. Medieval people believed toothaches were caused by a toothworm gnawing inside the molar. The cure was extraction.
The tool he uses looks like a pelican's beak and is actually called a dental pelican. It creates leverage against the gum to wrench the tooth out sideways. It often took a piece of the jawbone with it. The trauma was so severe that people sometimes died from shock in the dentist's chair. But let's assume you are healthy. You have all your limbs and teeth. You are young. You are essentially a child. You have a job that sounds like a fairy tale, but is actually a psychological nightmare. You are going to live in the palace with the prince. You are going to be his best friend. But every time the prince makes a mistake, every time he fails a Latin lesson or insults a duke, you are going to pay for it. Meet the whipping boy, the human punching bag. You are 8 years old. You are sitting in a lavish schoolroom surrounded by books worth more than your parents' house. Sitting next to you is the future King of England, perhaps a young Edward VI. The prince is struggling. He is trying to conjugate a Latin verb, and he keeps getting it wrong. The tutor, a stern man with a bundle of birch rods, is getting frustrated. He asks the prince one last time. The prince stammers. The answer is wrong. The tutor sighs, picks up the birch rod, and turns to you. "Drop your trousers," he says. You are the whipping boy. This job exists because of a theological loophole called the divine right of kings. The monarch, and by extension his heir, is appointed by God. To strike the prince would be to strike God's chosen vessel. It is technically treason. If the tutor hits the prince, he could be executed. But the prince is a child, and 16th century pedagogy believes that learning only enters the brain through the sensation of pain on the buttocks. So how do you discipline a child you aren't allowed to touch? You get a proxy. You were chosen from a noble family to be the prince's companion. You eat with him, play with him, and learn with him. You are his best friend, and that is the trap. The theory is that when the prince sees his best friend screaming in pain because of his mistake, he will be so overcome with guilt that he will study harder next time. It is institutionalized emotional blackmail. Imagine the pressure. You are sitting there praying the prince remembers the capital of France. If he forgets, you bleed. Your physical safety is entirely dependent on the academic performance of a spoiled aristocrat. And what if the prince is a sociopath? What if he doesn't care? Then you are just getting beaten for free. However, if you can survive the childhood trauma, the retirement plan is excellent. Whipping boys who endured the beatings often became the king's most trusted advisors as adults. Barnaby Fitzpatrick, the whipping boy for Edward VI, became a court favorite. After all, nothing bonds two men quite like one of them taking a beating for the other's bad grammar. But let's leave the emotional scars of the palace and head back to the open road. You want show business. You want to travel. You want to entertain the masses. You join a traveling troupe. You hear the music, the laughter, the cheering crowds. But then you see your co-star. He is 7 feet tall, weighs 600 pounds, and claws the length of steak knives. He is a brown bear, and you are the bear ward. You are essentially a medieval lion tamer, but without the whip, the chair, or the safety regulations. You are walking a wild apex predator on a leash through crowded villages, hoping it doesn't decide that the audience looks like a buffet. The dangerous dance. You are walking down a dirt road in 16th century England. You are hungry, tired, and your feet are blistered, but you are not alone. Walking beside you on a heavy iron chain is a 600-pound European brown bear.
You are a bear ward. To the peasants in the village, you are a source of wonder. They have never seen a monster like this. You play a pipe, and the bear stands on its hind legs and dances. The crowd cheers. They throw copper coins. It looks like a whimsical Disney movie. But the reality is a nightmare of logistics and adrenaline. You are essentially a long-haul trucker, but your cargo is a living apex predator that can decapitate you with a single swipe. You have to feed this beast every day. A bear eats massive amounts of food, meat, bread, fruit. Often the bear eats better than you do. You sleep in the barn with it, listening to its breathing, hoping the chain holds. But the dancing is just the warm-up act. The real money, the Super Bowl of medieval entertainment, is bear baiting. You take your bear to London, to the Bear Garden in Southwark. It is a round arena, smelling of sawdust and blood. The stands are packed with screaming fans, from lowly thieves to high-ranking dukes. Even Queen Elizabeth I is a huge fan. You chain your bear to a stake in the center of the pit, and then the betting starts. The odds are shouted out, and then they release the dogs. Huge mastiffs, bred specifically for violence, are unleashed. The noise is deafening, the barking, the roaring of the bear, the screaming of the crowd. Your job is to manage your asset. You want the bear to win, but you don't want it too damaged, because if the bear dies, your livelihood is gone. Bears are expensive, dogs are cheap. It is a gruesome, blood-soaked spectacle. Sometimes the bear breaks loose. In one famous incident, a bear named Sackerson broke his chain and mauled several spectators. As the bear ward, you are legally responsible. If your bear eats a child in the front row, you are going to prison. It is a life of violence, animal cruelty, and constant danger. But at least you're part of the entertainment world. People want to see the show. Now, imagine a job where you are the show, but nobody wants to see you afterward. A job where you are so feared and loathed that you are legally banned from living inside the town walls. You cannot touch food in the market. You cannot enter a church. You are the ultimate outcast. You are the headsman. Forget the movie tropes. You don't wear a hood. Everyone knows exactly who you are. And contrary to popular belief, you aren't just a brute with an axe. You are a highly skilled technician of death. And if you mess up, the crowd will kill you. The Lonely Blade. You live in a house apart from the village. Sometimes it is painted a distinct color or has a specific symbol carved on the door just to warn strangers, do not knock. You are the executioner.
Society needs you, but society hates you. You are infamous by law. In many European cities, you are not allowed to enter a tavern. You cannot attend church services with decent folk. You have to stand in the back or in a special segregated porch. When you go to the market to buy vegetables, you cannot touch the produce. You have to point at the cabbage you want with a white wand or a spoon, and the merchant drops it into your basket so his hand doesn't brush yours. You are a contagion. But on the scaffold, you are a rock star. The entire town turns out to see you work. And it is work. It is not a rampage. It is high-stakes geometry. You have to sever the cervical vertebrae with a single blow. If you are using a sword for aristocrats, you need the finesse of a golfer and the strength of a butcher. If you are using an axe for commoners, you need raw power. The pressure is immense. The victim kneeling before you often hands you a coin purse. This is a tip. They are literally paying you to do a good job so they don't suffer. "Strike true," they whisper. Imagine the anxiety. You have a hangover. The sun is in your eyes. The crowd is silent. You swing and you miss. You hit the shoulder. The victim screams. The crowd gasps. You swing again. You hack. A botched execution is a public relations disaster. The most famous example is Jack Ketch, a 17th century executioner who was so incompetent he became a synonym for clumsiness. When he executed Lord Russell, it took him 4 blows.
By the second blow, Russell reportedly looked up and said, "You dog, did I give you 10 guineas to use me so inhumanely?" If you mess up bad enough, the crowd will storm the scaffold. There are records of executioners being beaten to death by angry mobs who felt the prisoner was being tortured unnecessarily. But if you are good, you are wealthy. You get a salary, fees for each procedure, beheading, hanging, flogging, breaking on the wheel, and, crucially, you get the perks. You have the rights to the victim's clothes. If a nobleman is executed wearing a velvet doublet and silk hose, that's yours. You can sell it. And you can sell pieces of the victim. Medieval and Renaissance medicine was horrifyingly magical. People believed that the touch of a hanged man's hand could cure cysts. They believed mummy powder, ground up human remains, cured internal bleeding. As the executioner, you are the wholesale supplier of this macabre pharmacy. You sell human grease, rendered fat, for rheumatism. You sell rope fragments from the hangman's noose as good luck charms. You are a merchant of death in every sense. But eventually, death becomes too big for even you to handle. It stops being a retail business and becomes a wholesale industry. The rats from the rat catcher have done their job. The fleas have bitten. The lymph nodes are swollen. The Black Death has arrived. The city is locking down. The rich are fleeing. The priests are dying. But one figure walks towards the infected houses. He looks like a nightmare bird from the apocalypse. He wears a long waxed leather coat, a wide-brimmed hat, and on his face is a mask with a 6-inch-long bird beak. You are the plague doctor, the bird of death. You are walking through a silent city. The doors are painted with red crosses. The only sound is the creaking of the dead cart. Then you see him. He looks like a nightmare hallucination. He is wrapped head to toe in waxed leather. He wears a wide-brimmed hat, and on his face is a mask with a 6-inch-long bird beak. You are the plague doctor, the bird of death. You are walking through a silent city. The doors are painted with red crosses. The only sound is the creaking of the dead cart. Then you see him. He looks like a nightmare hallucination. He is wrapped head to toe in waxed leather. He wears a wide-brimmed hat, and on his face is a mask with a 6-inch-long bird beak. You are the plague doctor, the bird of death. You are walking through a silent city. The doors are painted with red crosses. The only sound is the creaking of the dead cart. Then you see him. He looks like a nightmare hallucination. He is wrapped head to toe in waxed leather. He wears a wide-brimmed hat, and on his face is a mask with a 6-inch-long bird beak. You are the plague doctor, the bird of death. You are walking through a silent city. The doors are painted with red crosses. The only sound is the creaking of the dead cart. Then you see him. He looks like a nightmare hallucination. He is wrapped head to toe in waxed leather. He wears a wide-brimmed hat, and on his face is a mask with a 6-inch-long bird beak. You are the plague doctor, the bird of death. You are walking through a silent city. The doors are painted with red crosses. The only sound is the creaking of the dead cart. Then you see him. He looks like a nightmare hallucination. He is wrapped head to toe in waxed leather. He wears a wide-brimmed hat, and on his face is a mask with a 6-inch-long bird beak. You are the plague doctor, the bird of death. You are walking through a silent city. The doors are painted with red crosses. The only sound is the creaking of the dead cart. Then you see him. He looks like a nightmare hallucination. He is wrapped head to toe in waxed leather. He wears a wide-brimmed hat, and on his face is a mask with a 6-inch-long bird beak. You are the plague doctor, the bird of death. You are walking through a silent city. The doors are painted with red crosses. The only sound is the creaking of the dead cart. Then you see him. He looks like a nightmare hallucination. He is wrapped head to toe in waxed leather. He wears a wide-brimmed hat, and on his face is a mask with a 6-inch-long bird beak. You are the plague doctor, the bird of death. You are walking through a silent city. The doors are painted with red crosses. The only sound is the creaking of the dead cart. Then you see him. He looks like a nightmare hallucination. He is wrapped head to toe in waxed leather. He wears a wide-brimmed hat, and on his face is a mask with a 6-inch-long bird beak. You are the plague doctor, the bird of death. You are walking through a silent city. The doors are painted with red crosses. The only sound is the creaking of the dead cart. Then you see him. He looks like a nightmare hallucination. He is wrapped head to toe in waxed leather. He wears a wide-brimmed hat, and on his face is a mask with a 6-inch-long bird beak. You are the plague doctor, the bird of death. You are walking through a silent city. The doors are painted with red crosses. The only sound is the creaking of the dead cart. Then you see him. He looks like a nightmare hallucination. He is wrapped head to toe in waxed leather. He wears a wide-brimmed hat, and on his face is a mask with a 6-inch-long bird beak. You are the plague doctor, the bird of death. You are walking through a silent city. The doors are painted with red crosses. The only sound is the creaking of the dead cart. Then you see him. He looks like a nightmare hallucination. He is wrapped head to toe in waxed leather. He wears a wide-brimmed hat, and on his face is a mask with a 6-inch-long bird beak. You are the plague doctor, the bird of death. You are walking through a silent city. The doors are painted with red crosses. The only sound is the creaking of the dead cart. Then you see him. He looks like a nightmare hallucination. He is wrapped head to toe in waxed leather. He wears a wide-brimmed hat, and on his face is a mask with a 6-inch-long bird beak. You are the plague doctor, the bird of death. You are walking through a silent city. The doors are painted with red crosses. The only sound is the creaking of the dead cart. Then you see him. He looks like a nightmare hallucination. He is wrapped head to toe in waxed leather. He wears a wide-brimmed hat, and on his face is a mask with a 6-inch-long bird beak. You are the plague doctor, the bird of death. You are walking through a silent city. The doors are painted with red crosses. The only sound is the creaking of the dead cart. Then you see him. He looks like a nightmare hallucination. He is wrapped head to toe in waxed leather. He wears a wide-brimmed hat, and on his face is a mask with a 6-inch-long bird beak. You are the plague doctor, the bird of death. You are walking through a silent city. The doors are painted with red crosses. The only sound is the creaking of the dead cart. Then you see him. He looks like a nightmare hallucination. He is wrapped head to toe in waxed leather. He wears a wide-brimmed hat, and on his face is a mask with a 6-inch-long bird beak. You are the plague doctor, the bird of death. You are walking through a silent city. The doors are painted with red crosses. The only sound is the creaking of the dead cart. Then you see him. He looks like a nightmare hallucination. He is wrapped head to toe in waxed leather.
The term puffer, or souffleur in French, was a derogatory nickname given to alchemists' assistants because they spent their entire lives puffing air into the fire. In alchemy, heat control is everything. Too cold, and the reaction fails. Too hot, and the vessel shatters. You are the medieval thermostat. But the heat isn't what kills you. It's the menu. You are cooking with the periodic table of death. The three main ingredients of alchemy are salt, sulfur, and mercury. Sulfur smells like rotten eggs and chokes you. Mercury, quicksilver, is the real killer.
To the medieval mind, mercury was magical. It was a metal that acted like water. They boiled it, evaporated it, and inhaled it. As the puffer, you are leaning over the crucible, breathing in mercury vapors for 12 hours a day. The symptoms of mercury poisoning are horrific. It starts with tremors, the hatter's shakes. Then your teeth loosen and fall out. You start drooling uncontrollably. And finally, the psychological effects kick in. Extreme paranoia, hallucinations, and rage. If you thought your boss was toxic, imagine a boss who is literally going insane from heavy metal poisoning while screaming at you to pump harder. And then there are the explosions. Alchemists were essentially experimenting with pressurized vessels before the invention of the safety valve. If a retort exploded, you were hit with shrapnel of glass and boiling acid. Many puffers were blinded or scarred for life. But let's say the experiment works, or more likely, your master pretends it works to get more funding from a gullible duke. Now you are an accomplice to fraud. If the duke finds out the gold is just lead painted yellow, he won't just hang the alchemist, he'll hang the puffer too, just to be thorough. So you decide to leave the intellectual life. You want fresh air. You want the open ocean. You want to see the world. You sign up for the Navy. Or maybe you get arrested for vagrancy and are pressed into service. You imagine sailing the Mediterranean, the wind in your hair. But you aren't going to be a sailor. You aren't going to touch a rope or a sail. You are going to be the engine. Welcome to the galley. You are chained to a bench. You are sitting next to 3 other men, a thief, a murderer, and a prisoner of war. You have an oar that weighs 300 pounds, and you are not allowed to stop rowing. The floating coffin. You are sitting on a wooden bench that is perhaps 12 inches wide. You are naked from the waist up. Your skin is burnt a deep leathery brown by the Mediterranean sun. You are chained by the ankle to the bench. You are a galley slave. Of all the careers we have discussed, this is the one closest to hell on earth. In the 16th and 17th centuries, navies, especially the French, Spanish, and Ottoman, needed speed. Sails are great when the wind is blowing, but in a naval battle, you need reliability. You need an engine that can reverse, turn on a dime, and ram the enemy. That engine is you. You are part of a bank. There are 3 to 5 men on your bench. You all pull a single oar. This oar is a massive tree trunk, nearly 40 feet long, weighing hundreds of pounds. You don't just pull it with your arms. You have to stand up, plant your foot on the bench in front of you, lift the heavy handle, and throw your entire body weight backward to drag the blade through the water. And you do this for 10, 12, sometimes 20 hours at a stretch. If you stop, the comite, the boatswain, walks down the center gangway, the coursier, with a bullwhip. He doesn't need a reason to hit you. He hits you to keep the rhythm. He hits you because he's bored. He hits you because you look tired. But the work isn't the worst part. It's the living conditions. You never leave the bench. You eat there, mostly hardtack biscuits filled with weevils and a splash of sour wine. You sleep there, slumped over your oar. And inevitably, you relieve yourself there. The waste drops into the bilge below, or simply pools around your feet. The stench of a galley was legendary. Sailors claimed you could smell a fleet of galleys coming miles before you could see them. It was a cloud of misery moving across the ocean. And then comes the battle. The drumbeat accelerates to ramming speed. Your heart is exploding. You're rowing so hard your muscles tear. You hear the wood splinter as your ship slams into an enemy vessel. Arrows and musket balls rain down. If your ship starts to sink, the soldiers and the officers jump overboard or scramble into lifeboats, but not you. You are an expensive piece of machinery, but you are also a prisoner. No one has the key to your shackles. As the water rises, you sit there, chained to the wood, pulling the oar, until the ocean swallows you whole. It is a fate so terrifying that judges used it as an alternative to the death penalty. To the galleys was often considered a harsher sentence than hanging. But let's assume you are too young for the galleys. You're a child. You're 6 years old.
You live in the quiet, pastoral countryside. Surely rural life is gentle. You are sent out into the fields. It's a beautiful spring morning. The birds are singing. And that is the problem. The birds are eating the seeds. Your father hands you a bag of stones. He points to the acres of wheat. He says, "Don't let a single crow land, or you don't eat tonight." You are a human scarecrow. The loneliest voice. You're 6 years old. You're standing in the middle of a massive muddy field in rural England. It is raining. It is always raining. Your job title is bird shooer or crow keeper. It sounds easy. Just scare the birds. But try doing it for 14 hours straight. You have no shelter. You have no books, no toys, no iPhone. You have a bag of rocks and your own voice. When a flock of crows descends on the newly planted seeds, you have to run at them, screaming and waving your arms. You throw stones. You use a wooden clacker to make noise. If you miss a spot, the crop is ruined. If the crop is ruined, the village starves. The psychological toll on a child is immense. You are completely isolated from human contact from dawn till dusk. There are records of bird shooers losing the ability to speak properly because they only ever screamed at animals. They became feral, more like the scarecrows they resembled than the children they were supposed to be. But at least the field is unlikely to explode.
If you're a child with a bit more ambition and a total lack of self-preservation, you might run away to sea. You want to be a pirate? A hero? The Royal Navy has a spot for you. You are small. You are fast. You are perfect. You are a powder monkey. We're back on the warship, but this time you aren't rowing. You are running. During a naval battle, the cannons on the gun deck are hungry. They need gunpowder. But you can't keep barrels of gunpowder next to the cannons because one stray spark would blow the entire ship to the moon. The powder is stored deep in the ship's belly in a lead-lined room called the magazine. Your job is to run barefoot from the magazine up the stairs, across the deck, which is slippery with blood, carrying bags of explosive gunpowder to the gun crews. You have to be fast. The cannons need to fire every 2 minutes. You have to be small. The ship is cramped, and you need to dodge the adult sailors who are fighting and dying around you. You have to be brave. Cannonballs are smashing through the wooden walls, sending splinters the size of spears flying through the air. And you have to be careful. If you trip and spill the powder, you're flogged. If you get too close to a lit slow match held by a gunner, you catch fire. If the ship takes a direct hit to the magazine, you are the first to vaporize. Powder monkeys were usually boys aged 10 to 14. They were the essential arteries of the warship, pumping the explosive blood to the muscles of the cannons. But they were considered expendable. In the casualty lists, they were often just listed as boys without even a name. But perhaps the ocean is too loud for you. You want a quiet, steady job. You want to work with textiles again. You hear about a luxury industry. The rich love hats. They love felt hats. To make felt smooth and shiny, you need a special chemical process. It's called carroting. You are a hatter, and you are about to go mad. The Orange Death. You are sitting in a workshop in the 17th or 18th century, though the practice started much earlier. The room is filled with steam and a strange metallic tang. On the table in front of you lies a pile of dead beavers. You are a hatter. Fashion demands felt hats. To make high-quality felt, the tiny hairs of the beaver fur must be separated from the pelt and matted together. But the fur is stubborn. It doesn't want to lock together. So you use a secret sauce. You take a brush and rub a bright orange solution into the fur. This solution turns the fur a carrot orange color during the process, a technique called carroting. The solution is mercury nitrate. As you hunch over the steaming vats, pressing and shaping the felt, the heat vaporizes the mercury. You are inhaling a neurotoxin with every breath. The result is a condition medically known as erythism, but history remembers it as Mad Hatter disease. It starts with the shakes. Your hands tremble so violently you can't hold a cup of tea. In Danbury, Connecticut, a hat-making hub in the USA, this was locally known as the Danbury Shakes. Then your speech becomes slurred. But the most terrifying symptoms are psychological. You become paranoid. You develop pathological shyness. Hatters were known to hide behind their workbenches if a customer entered the shop. You are easily agitated, prone to explosive outbursts of anger, and plagued with hallucinations. Lewis Carroll didn't invent the character of the Mad Hatter out of thin air. He was documenting a tragic industrial reality. The price of a gentleman's fashion was the sanity of the man who made it. But at least the hatter works indoors. There are jobs where the environment itself is trying to eat you. Let's go to the construction site of a great medieval castle. Look at the mortar holding those massive stones together. It's white, hard, and durable. It's made from quicklime, and the man who makes it has one of the most dangerous jobs in construction history. He is the lime burner. You are standing next to a lime kiln, a giant oven built into the earth. Your job is to take limestone, chalk, and cook it at over 900 degrees Celsius or 1,650 degrees Fahrenheit for days on end to create quicklime. The danger is threefold. First, the heat. If you fall into the kiln, which happened since you're working at the edge of a pit, you are incinerated instantly. Second, the gas. Burning limestone releases massive amounts of carbon monoxide. Lime burners would often try to sleep near the kiln on cold nights. They would drift off comfortably and simply never wake up, suffocated by the invisible gas. Third, the product itself. Quicklime is caustic. It reacts violently with water. If the fine white dust gets into your eyes, the moisture in your eyes turns the dust into a boiling paste that blinds you. And here is the cruelest twist. You are sweating. If the dust covers your skin and mixes with your sweat, it begins to burn you chemically. You are being cooked by your own perspiration. But let's say you survive the kiln. You want to help build the cathedral itself. You want to reach the heavens. You look up at the spire, hundreds of feet in the air. How do they get the stones up there? They don't use elevators. They use a great wheel. And guess who is inside? The hamster wheel of death. You are 200 feet in the air, dangling over the city of Paris or London. You are building a cathedral to the glory of God, but you feel very far from heaven. You are a treadwheel crane operator. Before diesel engines and hydraulics, if you wanted to lift a 2-ton block of limestone to the top of a spire, you used the Magna Rota, the Great Wheel. It's a gigantic wooden wheel, maybe 15 feet in diameter, mounted on the scaffolding high above the ground. You climb inside the wheel. You are the motor. You walk forward, climbing the slats, and your weight turns the wheel, which winds a rope around an axle, lifting the stone below. It is boring, repetitive cardio, but it is also a death trap. You cannot see the load you are lifting. You're relying on a guy leaning over the edge shouting instructions at you. Walk! Stop! Walk!
The danger comes from physics. If the rope snaps, the load plummets. But if the load is too heavy and starts to pull the rope back out, the wheel reverses. There are no emergency brakes. The wheel starts spinning backward faster and faster. You are inside a washing machine on the spin cycle. You have two choices. Try to run backward fast enough to counter the spin, impossible, or curl into a ball and pray. Operators were frequently centrifuged, spun around until their limbs broke against the wooden struts, or simply ejected out of the open side of the wheel, falling hundreds of feet to the nave floor below. But let's say you survive the fall. You die of natural causes in your bed. Your family is grieving, but there is a problem. You were a sinner. You swore, you drank, you didn't pray enough. Your family is terrified your ghost will haunt them or that you won't make it to heaven. They need a specialist. They need someone to take your sins away. They send for the sin eater. You are sitting on a low stool outside your hovel. You are poor, ragged, and hungry. A family approaches you with a coin and a loaf of bread. They hate you, but they need you. You follow them to the house of the dead man. The corpse is laid out on the table. The family places a loaf of bread and a bowl of ale or milk directly on the dead man's chest. They believe the bread absorbs the sins of the deceased like a spiritual sponge. Your job? Eat the bread, drink the ale. By consuming the meal, you are literally eating the dead man's sins. You are taking his lies, his thefts, his adulteries into your own soul so that he can fly free to heaven. The family sighs in relief. He is clean now, they say, and then they kick you out. Because now you are full of sin. You are spiritually radioactive. You are the waste bin of the village's morality. People avoid your gaze. You are necessary for their salvation, but you are too unclean to be treated like a human being. But at least the sin eater leaves the body behind. There is a profession that comes for the body itself, a profession that flourished in the 18th and 19th centuries, driven by the hunger of medical schools for fresh meat. You are a resurrectionist, or as the public calls you, a body snatcher. The night shift. It is 2 a.m. in a London churchyard circa 1820. The fog is thick, which is good for business. You are standing over a mound of fresh earth. You are not mourning. You are calculating. You are a resurrectionist. The medical schools of London, Edinburgh, and Harvard are booming. Anatomy is the future of medicine. But to learn anatomy, you need to cut people open. The law says surgeons can only dissect executed criminals, but there aren't enough murderers to go around. So the surgeons turn to you. They pay no questions asked. A fresh corpse under 3 days old can fetch 10 pounds, nearly half a year's wages for a laborer. You aren't stealing the jewelry or the clothes. That's a felony. You are stealing the body, which legally is a misdemeanor because a corpse is not property. You are a loophole entrepreneur. But digging a 6-foot hole takes too long. You need speed. You use the tunnel method. You dig a small, square hole down to the head of the coffin. You snap the lid with a crowbar. Then you use a hook or a rope, loop it around the corpse's neck or under the arms, and heave. You drag the body out like a stubborn root vegetable. You strip it naked, leaving the shroud in the grave to avoid theft charges, bag it, and fill the hole. If you are good, you can clear a grave in 30 minutes. But the public is fighting back. They are building mort safes, heavy iron cages placed over graves. They are hiring armed guards. They are building dead houses to store bodies until they rot enough to be useless to anatomists. But the job is dangerous. If the cemetery guns, tripwire-activated flintlocks set around graves don't get you, the mob will. Resurrectionists caught by the public were often beaten to death on the spot. But the real darkness isn't in the digging, it's in the sourcing. As demand rose, some resurrectionists got lazy. Why wait for someone to die? 2 men in Edinburgh, Burke and Hare, decided to skip the middleman. They murdered 16 people and sold them to Dr. Robert Knox. They weren't body snatchers, they were manufacturers. Eventually, the Anatomy Act of '32 ruined the business by allowing unclaimed bodies from workhouses to be used for science. The golden age of grave robbing ended. So you lose your job, but you have developed a tolerance for darkness, smells, and confined spaces. You decide to go underground, deeper than the grave.
You are heading into the labyrinth of tunnels beneath London. You are going hunting, but you aren't hunting animals. You are hunting trash. You are a tosher. The sewer hunter. You are standing in absolute darkness. The air is thick, humid, and warm. You hear the rushing of water and things that sound like water but are much thicker. You light your lantern, which is strapped to your chest, and the beam cuts through the gloom to reveal a brick tunnel. You are a tosher. In Victorian London, the sewer system was a labyrinth of mystery. While the mudlarks scavenged the riverbanks of the Thames at low tide, the elite scavengers went underground. You are the Indiana Jones of sewage. You wear a heavy canvas coat with massive pockets, an apron, and arguably the most important tool of your trade, a long pole with a hoe on the end. You use this to test the depth of the sludge in front of you so you don't step into a sinkhole and vanish, and to hook treasure out of the muck. What are you looking for? Tosh. Tosh is slang for copper. You are hunting for scraps of metal, old nails, coins, and the Holy Grail, silver spoons or cutlery that slip down the scullery sink of a wealthy household. A good tosher could earn a decent living, sometimes 6 shillings a day, which was a fortune compared to a factory worker. But the sewers are alive, and they are trying to kill you. First is the tide. The London sewers drain into the Thames. When the tide comes in, the river water rushes back up the pipes. If you are deep in a tunnel when the tide turns, you are trapped. The water rises to the ceiling. You drown in a mixture of river water and human waste. And then there are the rats. Toshers told legends of queen rats, massive rodents that could lead swarms to attack a man. While likely exaggerated, the reality of being cornered by 100 hungry rats in a confined tunnel is terrifying enough. And finally, the gas. Pockets of methane could suffocate you silently, or worse, your lantern could ignite them. Boom!
The police tried to ban toshers. They walled up entrances, but the toshers just found new cracks to slip through. They were a secret society, navigating a map that existed only in their heads. But maybe you are too claustrophobic for the tunnels. You want to see the sky. You want to climb high above the smog. You are small. You are 4 years old. Your master bought you from your parents for a few guineas. He tells you to look up at the narrow, twisting brick chimney. Up you go, he says. You are a climbing boy, and you are the human chimney brush. The black lung kindergarten. You are wedged inside a brick throat. It is pitch black. The flue is only 14 inches by 9 inches. You cannot turn your head. You cannot look down. You can only scramble upward, inch by inch, pressing your raw knees and elbows against the rough brickwork. You are a climbing boy. This was the dark heart of the Victorian home. People loved their coal fires, but the flues were narrow and twisted to improve the draft. No brush could navigate the sharp right-angle turns. Only a small, flexible child could do it. Your master hardened you for this. When you first started, your knees and elbows bled from the friction. He took you home, washed the wounds with salt water, and placed you in front of a hot fire. This was to toughen the skin, turning it into a callus as thick as leather. It was agonizing, but necessary. Soft skin doesn't climb brick. The dangers are immediate. You might slip and fall. You might get stuck at a narrow bend. If you panic and hyperventilate, your chest expands, wedging you tighter. In the worst cases, masters would light a small fire in the grate below to encourage a stuck boy to climb faster. Sometimes the boy didn't move. They would have to break the wall open to get the body out. But the long-term killer is insidious. You are climbing naked to avoid snagging clothes. The soot, a mixture of carbon and tar, grinds into your skin. It settles in the folds of your body.
In 1775, Surgeon Percival Pott noticed something strange. Chimney sweeps were dying of a specific aggressive cancer in the scrotum. It was the first time in medical history that a specific job was linked to a specific cancer. The soot was carcinogenic. The boys were literally bathing in poison every day. You are a living tool, disposable and cheap. Apprentices were often sold by parents for a few shillings. When you grew too big, usually around age 10 or 12, your career was over. You were cast out, illiterate, with deformed joints and damaged lungs. But let's say you escape the chimney. You want a job that keeps you outdoors, in the fresh air. You want to be your own boss. You see an old woman walking down the street. She is carrying a bucket. She stops, looks at the ground, and smiles. She picks up a piece of white dog feces with her bare hands and drops it in the bucket. She is a pure finder. And in Victorian London, she is holding a commodity almost as valuable as brass, the white gold. You are walking the streets of Victorian London, scanning the pavement with the intensity of a gold prospector. But you aren't looking for nuggets, you are looking for dog poop, specifically dry white dog poop. You are a pure finder. In the hierarchy of scavenging, this is a weirdly specific niche. The name pure is a dark industrial joke. The substance you are collecting is filth, but it is used to purify leather. We've already talked about the fullers using urine to degrease wool. Well, the leather industry, located in the stinking district of Bermondsey, has an even grosser requirement. After an animal hide is soaked in lime to remove the hair, the lime leaves the skin stiff and brittle. To make soft, high-quality leather for gloves, bookbindings, and shoes, you need to remove that lime. You need an enzyme that breaks down collagen and neutralizes alkali. And in the 19th century, the best source of that enzyme is the feces of a carnivorous animal. Since lions are scarce in London, dogs are the suppliers of choice. Tanneries would pay top dollar for a bucket of pure. A pure finder could earn enough to actually live reasonably well compared to other street folk. But you had to be quick. You had to know where the stray dogs congregated. You had to get there before the street sweepers, who just washed it away, or rival collectors. You carry a covered bucket to mask the smell, somewhat, and a black leather glove on your working hand. You are the essential link in the fashion chain. That elegant lady pulling on her soft kidskin gloves, she is wearing leather that was marinated in a soup of dog excrement collected by an old woman in a gutter. But pure was safe. It was organic. It washed off. Now, let's enter a factory where the substance you touch doesn't wash off. It absorbs into your bones. It makes you glow. You are a young girl, maybe 14. You're working in a match factory in East London. You spend 14 hours a day dipping wooden sticks into a white paste. The paste is white phosphorus. You are a match girl, and you are about to develop a condition so horrific that it sounds like a ghost story. They call it phossy jaw. The fumes from the phosphorus travel into your mouth. They find a way into your jawbone, usually through a cavity or a gum infection. Once inside, the phosphorus reacts with the bone. It begins to kill the tissue. It starts with the toothache. Then the gums swell. Then the abscesses form. The smell is putrid, rotting flesh inside a living mouth. But the most terrifying symptom happens at night. If you turn out the lights, the jaw of the victim actually glows a faint green-white in the dark. The only cure is amputation. Surgeons have to open the face and remove the entire jawbone. There are photos of women who survived. Their lower faces are just gone, caved in. And for what? So people could light a candle easily. But maybe the factory is too enclosed for you. You want to be a pioneer. You want to build the infrastructure of the future. You want to build a bridge, specifically the Brooklyn Bridge. But to build deep underwater, you need to breathe. So they put you in a box, a caisson. You are a sand hog, and you are about to discover a new way to die. The bends. You are sitting in an airlock. The heavy iron door clangs shut above you. You feel your ears pop violently. The air pressure is rising. You are descending into the mud at the bottom of the East River in New York City. You are a sand hog.
The year is 1870. They're building the Brooklyn Bridge. To create a foundation strong enough to hold the massive stone towers, they have sunk a giant wooden box, a caisson, to the riverbed. It is the size of 4 tennis courts. It has no bottom. It is held down by the weight of the stone being built on top of it. To stop the river from rushing in and drowning everyone, gigantic steam engines on the surface are pumping compressed air down into the box. You are working inside a bubble of high-pressure air at the bottom of the river. The environment is alien. Your voice sounds high and squeaky, like helium, because the air is so dense. You can't whistle. Candles burn twice as fast, and if you blow them out, they might spontaneously reignite. The mud is wet, dark, and smells of centuries of New York sewage. You dig. You shovel the muck into shafts to be sucked up to the surface. But the digging isn't the killer. The elevator ride is. When your shift ends, you are tired. You want to go home. You step into the airlock, and the pressure is released quickly so you can exit. This is a fatal mistake. Inside the caisson, the high-pressure forced nitrogen gas to dissolve into your blood. When the pressure drops too fast, that nitrogen comes out of solution. It turns into bubbles. Think of shaking a soda bottle and then cracking the lid. That fizzing is happening inside your veins. The bubbles block blood flow. They lodge in your joints. They tear through your spinal cord. The pain is excruciating. Workers would double over in agony, unable to straighten up. Because this posture looked like a fashionable walking pose of the time called the Grecian bend, the workers gave the disease a grim nickname, the bends. Doctors were baffled. They called it caisson disease. They prescribed rubbing liniment on the legs or drinking wine. Nothing worked. Men became paralyzed. Men died screaming. Even the chief engineer, Washington Roebling, was struck down. He spent the rest of the construction watching the bridge rise through a telescope from his bedroom window, an invalid for life. 110 men were treated for the bends on the Brooklyn Bridge project. 3 died, officially, though likely more. It was a physiological torture chamber used to build a monument to progress. But let's leave the stifling heat of the pressurized box. You want to cool down. In fact, you want to freeze. You want to work in an industry that literally harvests winter. You are standing on a frozen lake in Massachusetts. You are holding a saw. You are looking at a horse that looks terrified. You are an ice cutter. The Crystal Harvest. You are standing in the middle of Walden Pond, or perhaps the Kennebec River in Maine. It is February. The temperature is 10 degrees below zero. The wind is howling across the flat white expanse. You are holding a 6-foot saw. You are an ice cutter. Before the invention of the electric refrigerator and the miraculous Freon gas, the only way to keep your meat from rotting in July was to borrow some winter from January. This created the massive ice trade. In the 19th century, New England didn't just export timber or fish, it exported cold. Blocks of ice cut from Massachusetts lakes were packed in sawdust and shipped as far as India, Brazil, and the Caribbean. It was a global empire built on frozen water, but harvesting it was a logistical nightmare. First, you have to clear the snow. Then a horse pulls a marker, a plow with blades to score a grid into the ice. This is where the danger starts. You are driving a 1,000-pound animal over a frozen surface. If the ice is too thin, or if there's a hidden fissure, the horse goes through. Now you have a terrified horse thrashing in freezing water, weighed down by a heavy harness. It will drown in seconds or die of shock. You need to get it out now. So, you kill it.
Well, almost. Every ice cutter carried a choke rope. It was a special noose around the horse's neck. When the horse fell through the ice, you didn't pull on the harness, which would just drag the horse under. You pulled the choke rope tight. You literally strangled the horse. By cutting off the air, you stopped the horse from struggling. It would stop thrashing and inhaling water. Crucially, the air trapped in its lungs kept it buoyant. It became a floating, unconscious balloon. Then the team would hook ropes to the harness and drag the limp animal onto the solid ice. Once safe, you loosened the rope. The horse would gasp, cough, shake itself off, and usually get right back to work. It was brutal, effective, and absolutely necessary. For the human workers, the danger was the product itself. Once the blocks were sawn free, weighing up to 300 pounds each, they had to be guided through channels of open water to the icehouse conveyor belt. You stood on the slippery edge, guiding these floating monoliths with a pike pole. If you slipped, you fell into the dark, freezing water. If the current pulled you under the ice sheet, you were gone. You were trapped under a glass ceiling that you couldn't break. And then there were the crushed toes. Sliding 300-pound blocks around like hockey pucks meant that if you didn't move your foot fast enough, it was pulverized. Ice cutters were known for having a distinct lack of toes. But at least the ice cutter worked in the open air. The danger was visible. You could see the crack in the ice. You could see the heavy block sliding towards you. Now imagine a job where the machine is bigger than you, louder than a thunderstorm, and moving faster than you can think, and you have to crawl inside it while it's running. You are a 6-year-old child in a cotton mill. You are a mule scavenger, the machine's lunch. You are crawling on your hands and knees across an oil-soaked wooden floor. The air is filled with cotton snow, white fibers that coat your hair, your clothes, and fill your lungs. Above you, a metal monster screams. You are a scavenger, also known as a piecer in a textile mill. The machine is the spinning mule. It's a massive contraption, 50 feet long, that spins thousands of threads simultaneously. It doesn't sit still. The carriage of the machine, a heavy wall of metal wheels and spindles, moves back and forth on a track. It rolls out 5 feet, spinning the thread, and then crashes back in to wind it. It moves like a rhythmic tide of iron. Your job is to clean up the waste cotton that falls underneath the carriage. If the waste builds up, it clogs the machine and could start a fire. Friction sparks, dry cotton equals inferno. But stopping the machine costs money. The factory owner keeps it running, so you have to time your run.
When the carriage rolls out, a gap opens up. You dive into the gap. You scramble under the machinery, sweeping the fluff with a small brush. You are flat on your stomach. The wheels are inches from your fingers. Then the carriage starts to return. You have seconds to get out. If you panic or if your sleeve gets caught on a cog, the machine doesn't stop. It rolls over you. Accidents were horrific and frequent. Children were crushed, decapitated, or had limbs torn off. The factory reports of the 19th century are a catalog of mutilation. Even if you didn't get crushed, the environment destroyed you. The noise was deafening. Most mill workers went deaf. The air was so full of cotton dust that workers developed bisonosis, brown lung disease. Your chest would feel tight on Monday mornings, Monday fever, and eventually you would just stop breathing. And you were doing this for pennies. You're essentially a human Roomba, but if a Roomba breaks, you don't bury it in a small pine box. But let's jump forward in time. The machines have become more precise. The world is becoming modern. We are in the roaring 20s in the USA. The war is over. The economy is booming. You get a job that is the envy of every girl in town. It pays well. The studio is clean and sunny. You get to work with a magical new substance that glows in the dark. You are a dial painter, and you are about to become a ghost while you are still alive. The girls who glowed. You sit at a workbench in Orange, New Jersey, or perhaps Ottawa, Illinois.
It is 1922. In front of you are trays of tiny watch dials and a pot of greenish-white paint. The paint is brand new. It's called Undark. It contains a miracle element discovered by Marie Curie, radium. Radium is the wonder drug of the age. Doctors say it cures arthritis, blindness, and even cancer. People drink radium water for vitality. And because it glows, the military needs it for instrument panels, and civilians want it for glowing wristwatches. Your job is to paint the numbers on the dials. But the numbers are tiny. The brush needs a super fine point. Your supervisor teaches you the technique: lip, dip, paint. First, put the brush in your mouth to point the bristles with your lips. Then, dip it in the radium paint. Finally, paint the number. You do this hundreds of times a day. Every time you point the brush, you swallow a tiny bit of radium. But it's safe, right? The supervisors say it's safer than salt. In fact, it's a beauty product. You and the other girls have fun with it. You paint your fingernails with it so they glow on dates. You sprinkle it in your hair so you shimmer at the dance hall. You are the ghost girls, literally glowing with health. Then the trouble starts. It begins at the dentist. A girl goes in for a toothache. The dentist pulls the tooth, but the wound doesn't heal. It bleeds and bleeds. Then the gum tissue starts to die. Then the jawbone itself starts to disintegrate. It becomes honeycombed with holes. The dentist tries to remove a piece of loose bone, and the entire lower jaw comes away in his hand. It is radium jaw. Radium acts like calcium. Your body loves calcium. It takes the radium you swallowed and deposits it straight into your bones. But radium is radioactive. It is blasting your skeleton from the inside out with alpha particles. You are a walking nuclear reactor. The companies, U.S. Radium Corporation and others, knew. Their scientists wore lead aprons and used tongs. They told you to use your lips because rags wasted too much expensive paint. When the girls started dying, the company doctors lied. They claimed the girls had syphilis to ruin their reputations and silence them. The radium girls eventually sued. They were dying in the courtroom, unable to raise their arms to take the oath because their spines were crumbling. But their fight changed labor laws forever. They proved that an employer could be held liable for the health of its workers. But let's move away from the slow, invisible death. Let's go to a job that requires instant, explosive speed. A job where you are the test subject for the most dangerous travel technology ever invented. You are strapped into a sled. Behind you is a rocket. You are a rocket sled test subject. The human bullet. We end our journey not in the mud of the Middle Ages, but in the blinding sun of New Mexico's desert. It is 1954. You are strapped into a metal chair. Behind you are 9 solid fuel rockets capable of generating 40,000 pounds of thrust. You are Colonel John Stapp, and you are a rocket sled test pilot. Throughout history, most dangerous jobs were forced upon the poor. But Stapp is a doctor and a physicist. He's doing this voluntarily. The Air Force wants to know, at what point does a human pilot simply turn into jelly? Everyone thought the limit was 18 Gs, 18 times the force of gravity. Stapp thinks they're wrong. He climbs into Sonic Wind number 1. He isn't wearing a flight suit. He's wearing a cardigan and a helmet that looks like a plastic bucket. The countdown hits 0. The rockets ignite. In 5 seconds, you go from sitting still to 632 miles per hour. You are moving faster than a .45 caliber bullet. Your face ripples like water in a gale. But the speed isn't the problem. Speed never killed anyone. It's the stop. The sled hits the water brakes. You go from 632 miles per hour to 0 in 1.4 seconds. This is a deceleration of 46.2 Gs. Your body now weighs over 4 tons. Your eyes feel like they're being pulled out of your skull. Your ribs crack. Your retinas hemorrhage, filling your vision with red whiteouts. When they pull Stapp out of the sled, he is blind. His eyes are filled with blood. He is in shock, but he smiles. His vision eventually returns. He proved that humans can survive crashes that disintegrate planes if they are strapped in correctly. Because of his bone-crushing rides, we got seatbelts, we got airbags. Every time you survive a car crash, you owe your life to the guy who strapped himself to a missile in 1954.